Okay.
I
Here we go.
think we are live. Hello,
We are
everybody.
live.
Mention in chat if you can actually see and hear us. I'm always uncertain about these online platforms. Okay, we appear to actually
Yay!
be live. Hello, everybody. I am Marie Brennan.
And I am Alyssa Helms.
And I
And
don't think we're going
together,
to.
we are
we
M.A.
are
Carrick.
M.A. Carrick. We hadn't decided if we were going to do our synchronized introduction or anything.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
I
didn't practice
decided.
it beforehand.
I see people commenting on the mask. I decided I should, dress. We both decided we should dress up fancy. Alyssa should show off the robe that they are wearing.
I'm wearing the robe that matches the cover of the book.
Yes, it's the kind of thing that Vargo would have. All of
Totally
the
kind of thing Vargo would wear.
All the clothing stuff, for the record, is Alyssa's doing. So if you like that part, credit to them. Pardon me. All right, everybody. So we've got several things planned for you. I am going to start off with a brief reading from The Mask of Mirrors, just about 5 minutes or so. And then we will talk a little bit about the magic behind stuff in the story, since that's kind of the focus of the event tonight. And then I'm going to do a few pattern readings for some of our guests, and Alyssa is going to go through the astrology charts, which, if you have not seen the pictures for those yet, we will make sure that you get a chance to see them, whether here, I don't know if we have screen sharing.
I'll be sharing my screen, yeah.
Awesome. And then we will also post this stuff on our website. But let us start off with the reading. So this is going to be from fairly early in the book, chapter 3. I think a decent number of you have read this already, so you'll be familiar with it. But this is when Ren, as Renata, the foreign Sateran noblewoman, is slumming with some of the other nobles in Lacewater, the neighborhood that she actually grew up in. And their little party has been interrupted by the arrival of the Rook. And I just realized this is being organized by the UK end of Orbit for, I think, primarily a UK audience, and I'm about to do a British accent for the Sateran part. No pressure. Okay.
Just really quick, I'm going to turn on my video so that you get the whole stage.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. All right. So the Rook has just appeared and attacked them and mostly disarmed people. Before she could think the better of it, Renata stepped forward. Her shoe came down on the blade of Metzen's sword just as the Rook crouched to pick it up. As I understand it, Alton Metzen gave the actor a chance to defend himself in an honorable duel, she said. Surely you can do no less. The Rook straightened slowly. Even close enough to touch, she could make out almost nothing through the darkness of his hood. The deeper shadows of his eyes, the line of his jaw. Like the stars, she saw more when she didn't look directly. Then a glimmer of a smile came into view. In 200 years, no one had unmasked Nededra's outlaw. Seeing him now, Ren was certain the hood was imbued to hide his face. The Rook could have been anyone, old or young, Leganti or Versenian or Nededran. The Rook said, I could do less, or a good deal more. Their audience was growing as people crowded to watch the scene, but his murmur was for her alone. Then it lifted up with mockery for everyone to hear. But if I'm to play at noble games, shouldn't I get a noble's reward for my trouble? She bent to pick up the sword, letting it dangle from her gloved fingers. What sort of reward could a man like you want? It took every ounce of deceit she possessed to make the question sound dismissive. What mask have I offended, meeting the Rook as a noblewoman? A man like me wants for little. The hood dipped to the sword in her hand, then rose once more. But as there's such a treasure, I'll take the Alta's gloves. Her fingers tightened on the sword's hilt as the onlookers gasped. Most of those watching were common Nededrans who cared little for Leganti ways. A few of them laughed. The nobles didn't. People of quality were not properly dressed in public without their gloves. By their lights, the Rook might as well have demanded she strip. A fair duel, Renata said, wrapping her hand carefully around the blade so she could offer the sword hilt first. And if you win, then a single glove. Her tone implied doubt. Inwardly she prayed, I hope you're as good as the stories say. Agreed. The Rook took the hilt, sliding the flat of the blade along her palm like he meant to cut his prize away early. I trust you'll remind me of the rules if I stray. You nobles make simple things so complicated. Flipping the blade, he tossed it to Metzen and drew his own. Metzen caught it, his previous swagger returning. I'm more than able to school muck-fucking scum like you. Don't worry, Alta Renata. I'll hand you his hood when I cut it off. The rook murmured, She can make gloves out of it. Uniat. His blade swept down and up to a high stance as he spoke the opening challenge. Metzen's grin slipped. The rook might claim ignorance of noble rules, but he knew the proper terms and forms for dueling. Tuat, Metzen spat in answer to the rook's challenge, and barely finished cutting his own salute before he attacked. Within 2 heartbeats, Ren knew she hadn't gambled foolishly. The rook dropped immediately from the straight-armed Leganti stance into the lower Versenian one, and met Metzen's charge without flinching, parrying the nobleman's thrusts with a few quick angles of his wrist. And he respected the rules of the game, passing up an opportunity to stomp on the arch of Metzen's foot, the way Ren would have done in his place. But she was a former river rat, and he was the rook. He could be brutal when necessary, but it was his flair that won him the hearts of the common folk. He danced out of the path of Metzen's thrusts with a little lace step, and when Metzen made the mistake of rushing him, the rook stepped in to meet it, locking them body to body in a brief circling waltz. Only a swift tilt of his head prevented Metzen's spit from flying into his hood, and he let go just in time to avoid an elbow to the jaw. The hood turned toward Ren. Remind me, Alta, are elbows permitted? They are not, she said, suppressing a laugh. I thought not. The tip of his blade rapped Metzen's arm hard, right where the nerve ran between skin and bone. Mind your manners, boy. The blow and the words were both calculated to enrage, but the increasing wildness of Metzen's attacks only left him vulnerable. Almost too fast for Ren to follow, the tip of the rook's sword snaked through the looping guard of Metzen's rapier and wrenched it from his hand. Metal grated as the hilt slid down the rook's blade. He twirled the trapped weapon in a full circle like a child with a toy, then tilted his hand so Metzen's sword flew clear. It flashed through the open air and sank, without a trace, in the waters of the canal. I believe that's Ninot, the rook said. Do you submit? I do not! But I thought being disarmed was a clear loss under the rules. The rook stepped back, placing himself by the wall of the bridge. Alta, you're the closest we have to an arbiter. Will you call Ninot? She pulled herself back into character, relaxing from the impassive posture she'd held during the duel. Assuming the rules are like those of Soteris, then yes, to be disarmed is to be defeated. Ninot. Metzen took a step toward the rook, hands curled into fists. That rapier was imbued by the swordsmith Vicadrius herself. There isn't another like it in Nadejra. The rook sheathed his blade. Then by all means, go after it. Renata saw the move coming. So did the rook. She suspected he'd invited it. When Metzen charged, the rook faded out of the way and applied boot to ass. The kick provided the extra momentum needed to send Metzen flying over the rail and into the canal. Though I believe it landed on the other side of the bridge. You might want to check there, the rook called down over the laughter and cheers from the onlookers. He hopped onto the rail and bowed. Then he turned to Renata. Now we see whether you, like our local nobility, will break the rules when it suits you. I believe you owe me a glove. The end. Ooh, Alice is back. I will say, by the way, if you have not listened to the audiobook, we got a truly fantastic narrator, so you should absolutely check that out. The fact that we were like, okay, so, you know, Ren as Renata needs to sound like she's British, and then when she's being Versenian, she needs to sound like she's Russian, and also Tess is Irish. Being able to fling all of that at her and have her cope was good.
Yeah.
So, yes, shortly after that scene, Ren continues onward to the Talon and Trick, which was their ostensible destination, and gets her pattern read, which we'll give a little bit of background now. We actually have several systems of magic in the book. There's pattern, which I'll be explaining in a moment. There's Numenatria, which is much more Alyssa's baby in terms of our world building. The astrology is built on the same principles as Numenatria. It's kind of like a facet of Numenatria in a sense. And then there's also imbuing, which gets no respect because it's like the workhorse everyday kind of magic, where basically people who make things can make them better. They can make them work better to a magical degree, so that like an imbued sword won't rust, it won't chip, it'll stay sharp in ways that a a normal sword isn't going to. You can imbue clothing, you can imbue many parts of the Rook's costume, as it gets mentioned, are imbued. So like his boots, it's things like they don't make as much sound when he runs, and also he can jump off tall things and they will cushion his fall in a much better way. So it is very much woven into everyday life in a way that makes people, even in the setting, kind of take it for granted.
Yeah, take it for granted. And also I think because it's not something, there's no like school you can go to for imbuing or apprenticeship you can do for imbuing. It's if you are learning a craft, like, you're a glass blower, then you might pick up how to imbue your glass blowing as a kind of a meditative practice. I think we've described it as when you're doing something and you get into the flow state where it's just kind of coming out and you're hardly thinking about it. That's the kind of state that we imagine imbuing is, but that's not something you can really teach. And so that's the other reason I think it doesn't get a lot of respect. It is the reason that we have kind of a stunted industrial revolution. There's no like mass production culture as much, because when your artisanal goods are magically better, you're gonna have that much more of a reason to stick with that.
And people who can imbue also work faster than ordinary, which is basically our reason for how Tess can actually do all of this stuff. Like, they go faster.
I mean, I have made a fully boned corset, Victorian corset, in 5 hours, but Tess could.
You had a sewing machine.
I had a sewing machine, and Tess could do it too.
Yeah. I saw the comments about divided the world building. There are some parts of it that we did, particularly with the magic, but actually a lot of the world building is stuff that we would just sit and like spitball with each other and come up with stuff together. The pattern was kind of my thing, because I knew, like we knew going into the story, that Ren was going to be a patterner, and she's the character that I kind of take point on. And then the Numenatria, there's a bit of a story here, which is that we had this idea of, okay, let's make a magic that's like based on sacred geometry. And I said, oh, I've got this book that I read actually back in high school, because it was for a weird class that I took, which I think Alyssa has within reach and can show off. Yes. What's the
take off post-it notes?
Yeah.
Oh, and it's all reversed too.
No, it's showing up correctly for everybody else.
Oh, it is. It's just on reverse for my screen.
Yeah. A beginner's guide to constructing the universe, the mathematical archetypes of art, nature, art, and science, a voyage from 1 to 10. So long title. But I was like, oh, this is all about like the different numbers and how you can construct the geometric figures and where these numbers show up in nature and in culture. And so the meanings that we assign to them. I was like, here, let me loan you the book and you can read it, and we'll see if that does anything. And then like this was on like a Friday or something, and Sunday Alyssa emails me this like 7-page document of Numenatria. Like, well, I guess the book was good, because I hadn't read the thing since high school. So I was like, I hope it's good. I remembered liking it, but I haven't read it in like 20 years. So the pattern, let me go through a little bit of how that works. So it is an oracle deck or a divinatory deck. But it is not a tarot in the sense of being, because I've seen in other novels where it's like, okay, here is the tarot, and we have put different names onto the cards. It has a whole like structure of its own to it. There are 3 suits in it, which get referred to as threads, because as soon as we decided to call it pattern, Versenian culture just kind of became textile metaphors ahoy. And so 3 threads, it's the spinning thread, the woven thread, and the cut thread. And the spinning thread is the inner self. So it is mental issues, spiritual things, like stuff that's internal to you. The woven thread is the outer self. So it is social relationships and institutions in society. And then the cut thread is the physical self. So it's the body in the material world. And then in each of those threads, there are 12 unaligned cards, and then 4 faces and 4 masks, which are in pairs. So those are called the aspect cards. And the faces and the masks refer to important deities in Versenian religion. The faces and the masks are considered to be, each one is a single entity, and the face is the benevolent side and the mask is the malevolent one. But because there's this duality built into the idea of it, whether a face card is good or a mask card is bad depends partly on their position. If they are revealed, then they're interpreted according to their good meaning. If they're veiled, they're interpreted according to the negative. And in order to do all of this stuff, we needed a deck, because we actually have a practice that all of the patterns in the story, they're real. I have a deck of blank cards that I wrote the names of the cards on, and we shuffle it, we cut it, we deal out the cards, and whatever we get is something that we do in the story. So they're set up. Here you go, the Mask of Mirrors. You can tell, super fancy here with my handwriting. I used blue for the spinning thread, and then that line represents a spindle, which is the symbol for it. The liar's knot is the woven thread, and so I use the hash to represent the woven part. Cut thread in red with an X for the shears. And then there are also 7 clan cards, which only get mentioned as chapter titles in the first book. There's more about them in the second one. They fell out of use after the Ajrani died because it was the card that represents the Ajrani actually went blank in everyone's deck everywhere. And that was considered really ill-omened, and so people stopped using the clan cards, though they do still exist. So here's the Hidden Eye, which is the Carrick card. And I used technically my idea for the symbol. And if you look at our website where we have a widget for doing pattern readings, it's a labyrinth is the symbol for this, but I cannot freehand a labyrinth very well, so I used a spiral instead. I did see the question, will the deck go up for sale? It is our dream that we should be able to crowdfund a version of the deck that will do like the full artwork and everything and look, really beautiful and much prettier than, this crap does. We have plans for doing this. It's kind of a question of timing because crowdfunding decks is not cheap. Like, we're talking, if we want to pay the artist the money that they will deserve for doing the art, then we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars to do it. So like probably 20,000 at a minimum. That's an undertaking. So basically, the bigger an audience the series has, the more people will be interested in buying the deck, the more likely it is you can get a deck. So go tell all your friends to buy it. We're subtle.
Solely because we want a deck, for no other reason.
Yes, no other reason at all whatsoever. But Alyssa, do you want to talk about like numinatria and astrology?
Yes. So numinatria, as Marie said, is a esoteric kind of very systematized understanding of geometry and numerology, sacred geometry and numerology, that basically takes the numbers 0 through 10 and ascribes kind of significance and magical meaning, and actually draws upon the power of the lumen, which is the Sateran godhead, to power them almost like they're engineering circuitry. So you draw down the power of the lumen using a focus at the center of the numinat that you've inscribed, and the power goes through it and goes through the various numen, the geometric figures that are on the numinat that you've described, and it creates a magical effect. So I don't know what else to say. I'm like, that's basically what it is. And so a lot of the kind of complexity for numinatria comes in with how complicated the charts are, how complicated what you want to do is, what the different associations of the numbers have. So I'll actually go through and talk about each of them, because we call them numen rather than numbers because there's a lot more magically going on with them than just being a number. So, for example, Ili is both 0 and 10, and that is the none that is many. And it's kind of this idea of this Ouroboros snake that eats its tail. It's the cycle of existence and the cycle of the lumen, where you come into the world and you live the life, and then you die and you go back to the lumen, and your impurities are burned away, and then you're reborn. So it's got a kind of a Sephiroth almost vibe with that, with, going to Kether and then falling down back to Malkuth again, things like that. So it's very much drawing on a variety of real world traditions that think in that way. So there's that. There's Uniat, which you heard Marie mention in the scene that she read. There was Uniat, Tuat, and Ninat, which one of the things we like to do is not just think about the magic system separately from the world, but how is it incorporated in the world? So, for example, pattern, it's the textile metaphors ahoy. With numinatria, there's a lot about the language that is incorporated into the world, and just the understandings of the numbers and the numen that are incorporated into the world. I think one of the phrases we use a lot is somebody having Korat's own luck, And Quorut is the Numen associated with 4, and that is the Numen of wealth and luck. So you hear a lot of kind of associations like that. But so Uniat, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to, sober as Sebat, because like Sebat
sober
is purity.
Sebat, because Sebat is purity and kind of asceticism, and also the art, the kind of perfection and imperfection. And if you're familiar at all with kind of Latin-ish roots, then you can sort of kind of track what the different Numen are, because we kind of drew that because Citerran and Leganti are Latin and Italian. We kind of drew on that for those naming. So Uniat is the axis mundi. It's the kind of center of the world, the axle on which the world turns, and it's also the self. Tuat is the self and other. It's the reflection. And so it's kind of got that almost yin yang, everything's pregnant with its opposite, duality kind of a thing. And duality also being very important in the setting because, masks and faces. And I think we can talk a little bit about faces and masks. But yeah, and so on and so forth. There's actually I won't go through them all actually, but there's a page on our website that describes the basics of it and gives you the basics of what the different Numen are. And so we had
things like their stones, their animals, and their colors and all the associations.
All those associations. And so from that we drew this system of astrology. And originally we had been kind of like, oh, there's going to be astrology, but it's not actually important for us to develop it all that well. And then we ended up having a character, Tanaquis, who is an astrologer, and her work became important, especially around Renata's birthday and Renata lying about her birthday, and then her lie about her birthday coming out. And then so suddenly we were like, I guess we need to understand astrology a lot better than just, okay, there's astrology and it's based on numinatria. So I went again and sat down and figured out how numinatria would be turned to astrology. And we'd already had the months and the days, how the months were broken up and how the kind of calendrical system worked. And that was also based on numinatria and the Citerran calendar, which is a 365-day year that's broken up into 10 months of 36 days each with 5 intercalary days. So we basically got rid of leap day because that's a big headache.
Their cosmos is more precisely engineered than ours.
I was going to say, and that's an interesting kind of contrast, I think, between the two magic systems, is that Ceteris and Seste Legante and Numinatria and all of that are very ordered and kind of
Apollonian,
rational. And I say rational because there's actually a lot of slippage in the meaning of the Numen, but they would identify themselves as rational, whereas pattern is very intuitive and relating a lot to dreams and intuition. And so inscriptors don't really get patterners, and patterners think inscriptors are too hidebound. So it's a nice kind of reflection of both the cultures as well that they're part of. Yeah.
All right. I should probably move on to pattern reading, which this is going to be interesting because I was not conceived on the Great Dream. So I am probably going to be less, uncannily accurate than Ren is, but I will do my best. And I can at the very least, give a little bit of a performance here. So I do not know who I am supposed to be reading for first. I know that we've had some volunteers who are queued up.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got Eleanor, Haley, and Sarah, I think, are our volunteers.
Yes. I don't know who wants to go first. If somebody wants to say in chat or just go ahead and
unmute your mic.
Themselves. Yeah. Volunteer for truth.
I would pick one.
All right. Haley, you were the last person to send a chat message there, so go ahead and unmute and you will be first.
Okay, I think I am muted.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, so what I'm going to do for this, there are multiple kinds of pattern that can be laid. And this was partly because we thought, well, we don't want to have to write a 9-card thing every single time we put this in the story. So there are 3-card lines. There's a 9-card pattern. A 3-card line is good for when, like, there's a specific problem that you're wrestling with, and so you want to do, where are you now with the problem? What is the path that you should follow, and where is that going to lead you to? Whereas the 9-card spread is more for just, like, reading somebody's entire entire pattern. And then in the second book, we actually introduce a 7-card wheel that's a different kind of shape for different purposes, because we figured the number 7 has so much significance, we needed to do something with it. But for this, I will do the 9-card spread for you. And I'm going to pull up here. I will not attempt to do this in the Versenian accent, but there are prayers that go with the process of the shuffling, because they shuffle 7 times, which Alice found out at one point is actually considered to be, I guess, the optimal number for randomization. Like, at that point, you have randomized the deck pretty thoroughly, and continuing to shuffle will not really increase the randomization. So it's going to be odd for me to recite this, not trying to do for the Versenian accent, because actually when we're doing it by ourselves, that is what I do. But the prayers are to the ancestors. So, Kirali, you'll hear shuffling noises as I do this. Bless my hands with grace to lay the pattern true. Anoshkin, bless my mind with light to know the faces and the masks. Varity, bless my eyes to see the pattern as it truly lies. Dvornik, bless my tongue with words to speak of what I know. Misaros, bless my heart with warmth to guide all those who seek my aid. Stretsko, bless my soul with strength to bear the burden of this task. Ijrani, favored daughter of Ajarais, bless me with your insight, that I may honor my ancestors and the wisdom of those who have gone before. So these prayers kind of allude to the the sorts of qualities and virtues that each of the ancestors, kind of has in their lore. And did I have to practice this loads? Well, we laid a bunch of patterns for the book, so I have had practice as a result of it. So now I can't easily angle my camera so that you will be able to see my desk, so I won't be able to show quite precisely, though maybe when I've set it up, I'll grab the camera and try to display it. But you lay from the bottom row first, and you go right and left and center, and then the middle row, right and left and center. There's not a lot of room on my desk. And then the top row, right and left and center, so that you get a 9-card spread that is 3 by 3. And the reason you go right, left, center is because the way that it gets recited is, for the bottom row, this is your past, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither, and you turn over those cards as you say them. So, give me a moment here to pull up my details, because with the card names, we actually took quite a while to finalize the names for them. And so some of the names I'm like, oh, yes, I know exactly what that is. And then others I have to remind myself a little bit because we changed our minds at the last minute.
Through iterations, yeah.
Oh, yeah. This was like a 6-part process to finally get these things named. So for your past, the good of it is Sisters Victorious, which is the card of courage. So because it is in the good position, that means it is revealed, interpreted according to its good meaning. And this means that in your past, there was some point where you had to rise to the challenge, you had to reach inside yourself to find strength in order to face whatever it was that you were dealing with. Now, what was that? This is where you look at all 3 of the cards together and they may start to build a picture. The Ember Adamant is the ill of it. So this was the card of debts. And this, because it's in the ill position, it is called veiled. And so this indicates broken promises, obligations unfulfilled, or like ruinous debt or something. And so what that might mean is that the card of courage indicates something where there was a moment where maybe someone broke a promise to you, or there was an obligation that they were not able to fulfill, or it might have been you who was unable to do this. I am inclined to interpret this as there was a time when someone failed you, because Sisters Victorious for courage, that would fit more of like you had to find a way to, rise to that challenge anyway. And then that which is neither. So this is the card that could be either it is neutral information on the situation, or it could be something that was very mixed. Like there were good and bad aspects to what it's referring to. And in this case, that is Two Roads Cross, which is the card of decision. It is like no more delaying, you know what your course is, or, you know, if it was veiled, it would be, you know, indecision, and you can't make up your mind. So what I do not have is Ren's ability to say, and now I know exactly what in your life this referred to. If I were better at cold reading, which is what con artists do, I would engage you in conversation such that I get you to tell me what it is that it's referring to, and then I'm like, yes, of course, this is what it's referring to. But sadly, or maybe not sadly, I am not a con artist, so I'm not going to pull that trick on you. So then it moves on to the present, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. So for the good, you have the Mask of Bones. For the ill, Wings in Silk, and that which is neither, the Face of Flames. Now, the Mask of Bones is the card of death and endings, but this is what I meant before about whether they are a negative meaning or a positive one depends on position, because the Mask of Bones in the veiled position, it asks you to look at that thing of death and endings and say, what is the good to that? Because sometimes things need to come to an end, right? It can be the card of, you know, a phase of your life had ended or is ending right now, as opposed to, it doesn't have to literally be, oh, sometimes it is, like someone died and that was good. that's the darker interpretation of the Mask of Bones. But in this case, it means that at the present moment, there is something which is coming to a natural conclusion, something that its time has finished, and it is a good time to let go of it. Wings in Silk is the card of transformation, or like crossing a threshold. But this is veiled, and so it can mean a failure to transform, that like you're holding back from a change that maybe needs to happen. Or it can also mean just sort of point of no return, that whatever change is about to happen, there is no taking that back. It is going to be done. And then the Face of Flames, for that which is neither. And now, especially in the middle position of the middle row, so the center of the entire spread, this is the one that can sometimes be very much the keystone to the whole reading, which is why when Ren patterns the Rook, she gets a migraine on that card, because the card that showed up there was exactly the keystone to the entire reading that would have revealed everything. And like, yep. Fortunately, we had already decided the Rook had magical defenses, and so those could just explain what happened there. But the Face of Flames is the card of creativity and creation. This one is from the cut thread, so it most often means like the physical act of creating things, but it's also just creativity more generally. And then your future, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. So this is where you look to, you know, what are the cards trying to tell you about? Because this is not a prophetic thing in the sense of, this is fixed and this will absolutely happen. Pattern is about seeing the connections between things. And so the future line tends to be, given the connections that exist, this is where they are leading to. But that doesn't mean those connections can't be changed. For the good, you have the Face of Stars, which is literally the card of good luck and good fortune and destiny and so forth. For the ill, Mother Unveiled, which is the card of teaching. So if it is, ironically, veiled, Mother Unveiled is veiled, it's either a refusal to teach someone something that they need to learn, or a teacher is giving you bad advice. They are leading you astray. And then the Face of Ages, for neither, is the card of the past and of tradition. So like this is the one that's going to point to like your elders or your ancestors and so on. It also has to do with learning and memory. And so that suggests a connection with Mother Unveiled, that there is a learning that needs to happen here, but perhaps the person that you will be learning from isn't actually the right teacher. Like you need to look for a better one. And that is the pattern, which, yeah, I'm really having the feeling here of, but when I do this for the book, I'm able to go on. Here's what it means, right? That's because I'm like literally a god in the context of the book, and I can control the world and make it fit what I want it to.
Oh, so neat.
The other thing that I will add here is that when you are doing a reading, you can also look at the pattern that the threads themselves form. So for the past line, there were 2 from the spinning thread, 1 from the woven. So that would kind of imply a stronger tilt towards that inner self. For the present, it is 2 from the cut thread and 1 from the spinning. And so that implies a tilt a little bit towards the body, the material world, and so forth. And then the future goes back to 2 spinning, 1 woven. So across the whole pattern, there are 5 cards from the spinning thread, which, statistically randomized, you would expect about 3 or so. And so this is the kind of thing where you would look at it and say, the overall bent of this is toward the inner self, towards thinking about what's going on in your own mind, or what's going on with you spiritually. And that's where the focus should go. Any questions? Or did I manage to eerily hit upon something that was exactly right?
I was going to say, we went from 2 to 17. So go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was about to say that you really got something right, because I just had to move back to the States from Scotland. And so that was a natural end, though. The visa expired. I was not deported or anything insane. Okay. But yeah.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
Okay. Makes sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, who wants to be next? And I will go ahead and start shuffling rather than making everybody wait while I do that.
Do you want Sarah or Eleanor?
Yeah. Let's go for Sarah next.
All right.
That way we can... Oh, I saw Eleanor there, but I just told Sarah to unmute. So Eleanor, I will do you after Sarah.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Give me a second to shuffle. And yes, I've gotten lots of practice with shuffling cards. That is unquestionably true. And you can certainly get a lot of this information not as sort of one codified spot, but if you look at the widget on our site, then it gives you the meanings of the cards, as they come up. We probably should provide something that will be, here's all of it in one place, rather than you having to basically hit deal over and over again until you've seen them all. That would be an inefficient way of doing it, I'll admit. All right. So, all right, begin to deal. All right, this is your past, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. And I will also note here that, patterners can choose to sort of turn over one card at a time and interpret it. More often they'll do the whole row at once because they're supposed to interconnect, and that will affect the interpretation. Or sometimes you turn over the entire spread at once, because that makes it a lot easier to play the person that you're trying to read for and figure out what they want. But I would need to be able to see you to do that. So, in the past, the good is One Poppy Weeps, the ill is Pouncing Cat, and that which is neither is Pearl's Promise. So One Poppy Weeps is the card of pain, and this is another one where it feels like that's just always going to be a negative card. But it's in the revealed position. So this is good pain. This is necessary pain. It might indicate something like, an injury that you were able to overcome, or it might be you had to do something that was painful but necessary. That it was kind of the rip off the Band-Aid all in one go, sort of just grit your teeth and get through it, and you will be better for it. Pouncing Cat is a counterpart sort of to Mother Unveiled. Mother Unveiled is the card of teaching. So it puts the focus on the teacher and on what lesson is being imparted and why. Whereas Pouncing Cat is the card of lessons. So that's why it's in the spinning thread. It is the internal thing of what have I learned, as opposed to that relationship between me and a teacher. Mother Unveiled is in the woven thread. But because this one is veiled, then it means there was a lesson you didn't learn. So that suggests maybe with One Poppy Weeps, it's the, I thought I could fly and I jumped off the roof and I broke my arm and I learned a valuable lesson. Maybe the pain was teaching you the lesson that you were otherwise failing to learn. And then Pearl's Promise from the woven thread is the card of reward, of getting what you deserve for the work that you did. Now, because it's in the neutral position, it's a little bit of you might have done some hard work and you sort of got rewarded, but it wasn't a really generous one. Or it might indicate that, lesson that you failed to learn, painful result, and so your reward is now you are older and wiser. For the present, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. Good is warp and weft, which, as the name suggests, is very literally from the woven thread. I'm amused that it took us forever to realize that the card of union, the card of things joining together, textile metaphors ahoy, maybe should be warp and weft, which is literally when things weave together the two types of thread going each direction. So yes, this means things coming together, so it can indicate stuff like marriage, it can indicate things like beginning a partnership, woven thread, so things coming together, it's usually going to mean in the sense of a social relationship of some kind. The ill of it is jump at the sun, which is the card of risk and taking a chance. Veiled means you took a chance and maybe it didn't turn out so well. So it might be that you tried like a partnership with somebody for something, and the thing that you guys attempted to do failed, but that didn't mean the partnership itself was a bad idea. And in the middle, the Mask of Worms. This is the counterpart to the Face of Roses. The Face of Roses is the card of health and medicine. Mask of Worms is like disease and poison and such. And so in this case, it means some kind of like illness, some kind of something's like wrong in the health of whatever it is that you're looking at. Given that this is the present, certain things obviously come to mind when it concerns disease and what's going on with it at the moment. For the future, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. So the good is the welcoming bowl. And this is the card of arrivals. This means some kind of newcomer to the situation. So in the future, someone new is going to come into your life, come into whatever it is that you are doing. And as such, it also indicates things like hospitality and welcoming whoever that person is that has just arrived. The ill of it is the Noble Heart. This is one of our clan cards, so I don't think this one even gets named in the first book. This is the card of the Massaros clan. And these are a little bit different in their meaning. The clan cards, there are sort of stereotypes for each of the clans based on the stories about their ancestor and so on. And, you know, because we're talking about I was about to say real people, real fictional people. You know, entire clans do not actually all have the same personality, but that doesn't mean that they don't have like endless jokes about, oh, this is exactly what a Stretsko would do and so forth. And so a clan card indicates the virtues and like flaws of that particular clan. The Massaros, the Noble Heart, refers to their sort of clan symbolic animal, which is the horse. And so the Massaros are hardworking and loyal and like great friends. And they're also kind of plotting and dull, and they can be really stubborn. So with the Noble Heart, this might be indicating, be careful that you don't like stick too hard. Don't be too stubborn, or, you know, be open to some imaginative possibilities rather than going, well, nope, here's the work that needs to be done and we're going to do that work and we're just going to put our head down and mush on through. And then that which is neither. This is a card that we actually renamed at the absolute last second so that we could make the Liars Not the title of the second book. The Face of Weaving was originally the Face of Knots until we moved that word. And this is from the woven thread, as you saw there. The Face of Weaving is really the card that is foremost about community bonds of whatever kind. So family and marriage is where this really focuses. So this is like the deity of community bonds. And so, you know, the general message of this card is nobody stands alone. And that can be a good thing and a bad one. Like I'm sure many people have, or at the very least know people who have families who are maybe not the best thing for them. And so with this being neither, it's both what are the strengths that you can draw from that, but then also what are the ways that it might end up holding you back. And that is it. I think we said something about there being a closing prayer, but I'm not sure we ever actually wrote the words of it.
I don't think we ever did.
No.
World building fail.
We'll fix that.
We will.
So thank you very much, and I hope that had something eerily correct for you as well.
Yeah, the thing in the past about doing something painful, I left my family to study abroad, so I guess
yeah,
that was painful but necessary.
Mm-hmm. I have never had the courage to do like an extended time abroad. The longest I did actually was there were 6 weeks that Alyssa and I were working on an archaeological field school in Wales and Ireland. That is where we met. And that's the longest I've ever been abroad, was 6 weeks there.
Thank you.
Right. You're welcome. Eleanor.
Hello.
Hello. All right, let me finish shuffling here. And I will try to remember at the end of this one to see if I am able to pull my camera. I don't know if the cable may be long enough for me to sort of uproot it from the top of my monitor and show you the spread with my wonderful handwriting and Sharpie on the cards. I want so much to have a pretty deck. We really want to be able to do this, but we got to make sure that we are able to pay the artists the money that they deserve. So, yeah. All right, this is, I'll recite that when I turn them over. I'll try to go a little bit quicker because I recognize these are a little slow. This is your past, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. So for the good, a brother lost, which is another one that we named late. So this is the card of wounds, you know, especially physical since it's from the cut thread, but also possibly, you know, more metaphorical. And because this is veiled, it can mean, you know, there was a past injury that you recovered from. There was something that broke, but you managed to mend it. The ill of it, the peacock's web, which also got considered at one point as the title for the second book. This is the card of riddles and enigmas. So if it's veiled, then an unsolvable riddle, or there's something where you were not able to see the answer to some kind of mystery that was in front of you. And then that which is neither, the Mask of Fools. This is actually the counterpart to the Face of Ages that we saw before. So this is about, rather than, you know, learning and memory in the past, it's ignorance and instinct and just living in the present. Ironic for the past line here. But what it could mean is that there just wasn't enough information, or you, like, your knowledge was limited, and so you were not able to, you know, see the wisdom in what you were facing. Or it could relate to not being able to solve that riddle. You just did not have the information. You were not ready for that yet. For the present, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. Good, Mother Unveiled, which we have seen before. And that is a good teacher that you have right now, or you are the good teacher, depending on what kind of situation you're in at present, doing a good job of conveying the wisdom that the teacher has to the student and, you know, showing them what they need to learn. For the past, we have another of the clan cards, the Silent Witness. This one is for the Enoshkin clan, and they're very much about, again, sort of the ancestors' memory, transitions and such. The Enoshkin are patient, but sometimes excessively enigmatic. Like they're more likely to be the ones who are like, ah, yes, I see, and then not tell you what they see. So veiled, it's maybe being a little too cryptic, a little too pleased with, you know, your own knowledge and not sharing it with people. And maybe a little too cold and unemotional, because they also sometimes get that reputation. And then for that which is neither, Wings and Silk, again, one we've seen before, that is the transformation. So this is a pivotal moment then. It suggests that you're at a point in time right now where a transformation could happen. And it's a question of, do you want it to or do you want it not to happen? And because it's in the neither position, it's not clearly a, ah, yes, you definitely need to, or no, you should refuse that. It's a choice. The future, the good and the ill of it, and that which is neither. For the good, you have the Face of Stars again. We have quite a bit of good luck going around for people's futures here. So the ill of it, 10 coins shine. This one is generosity. But if it's in the veiled position, then essentially it means like unwillingness to show generosity or taking advantage of somebody rather than opening your heart to them and such. And then for the center, Hare and Hound, the card for which we invented an entire folktale to explain why we named it that. It's the card of adaptability. And so I actually had a Twitter thread where I posted about a folkloric motif called a transformation chase, where one person changes into A, and so another person changes into a thing that will catch A, and then they turn into B, and a thing that will catch B, and so on. And so this is a reference to clever Natalia, this sort of Versinian trickster heroine, and an evil sorcerer that she was trying to escape from. So for the future, it says, the thing to pay attention to is adaptability. Like, since it's neutral again, when should you be flexible and adapt to the situation, and when should you be standing your ground? And now let's see if I can, it's going to be, there we go. So yeah. You can see as I try to lay it out under my monitor stand there. Super, amazing looking. There we go. And I hope some of that was useful to you.
Oh, yes. No, that was really interesting, especially what you were saying about a transformation could happen. I've got something next week that I'm looking forward to, which could be a good opportunity for me. So fingers crossed. Yeah. And lots of good luck, hopefully, in my future. Yeah.
May you see the face and not the mask.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really interesting.
You're welcome. Do we want to switch to the astrology? Because I see we're already almost at 1 o'clock here. And I know we have questions as well. So, Alyssa, you want to take over briefly?
Yeah, and I actually figured, because I sent out charts and very detailed breakdowns to everybody who had submitted a date. So I actually thought that instead of going through each chart in detail, also because it would get a little repetitive, especially because we have a lot of people who have Uniat and Korat and Quinat in their readings. I figured I would actually pull out some of the interesting bits. So I'm going to share my screen, so you will not have to look at us anymore. So a stream is limited to 6 simultaneous video sources. Screen share, guest share. Oh, I think can we remove the guests from the chat room? That might be.
Oh, yeah. We might need to do that in order to...
Or from the green room? Yeah, because it won't let me share my screen.
I'll do that now.
All right. Sorry about that. We tested it this morning, but it was just me and Nazia. So, all right. Now it's letting me do it. Application window.
I'm just answering in chat briefly the ones that are, very quick responses and not a thing for us to really talk about.
There it goes. All right. So can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So this is actually Ren's chart, because I wanted to pull it out so that I could describe really quick what's going on in the charts. And so this is Ren's chart for her actual birth date, not the fake birth date that she gives at one point in the book. And the way it's charted is there's basically 3 different things. There's prime, your prime, which is the birth month that you're born in and the time of day, whether you're born in the daytime or the nighttime, it determines your prime. Your alter, which is the day of the month that you're born, the actual date, and where in the month it occurs. And then your trisect, which is the year, decade, and century that you're born in based on the Sateran calendar. And so you see that Renata has a prime of Quinat influenced by Korat. And so Quinat, which is 5, which is the pentagram that you see here, has a lot to do with power and healing. And so this kind of means that she's a person who feels powerless, wants power, kind of craves that. But then influenced by Quinat, Quinat is the numen of, it's 4, and it's the numen of wealth and luck. And one of the things you'll notice is that she's actually got, Korat is for the numen of wealth and luck. And one of the things you notice is that she's got a lot of Korat here, which basically means that Renata is somebody who is very focused around both wealth and luck, and especially somebody who kind of can see the patterns of fate and manipulate them to her benefit. So it's actually a very very fitting thing. One of the other things we realized is that if you transpose Renata's birth date to our calendar, she was born on December 31st, 1999. So she's really the last baby of the last century. Yeah. But then we get to Eleanor, and I am going to, I think you'll still be able to see my screen if I open up my document, because I have a cheat sheet. So Eleanor is ruled by Uniat, the Axis Mundi, which is a person who is very self-aware, independent, and sometimes prone to bouts of self-reflection and self-recrimination. And I'm going to talk actually a little bit about, so that's what the prime is Uniat. And then the altar is the path. And that's the kind of path that the individual that's discussed in prime travels through the world. So the path for Eleanor would be Sesat, influenced by Korat. And for Sesat, it's the Numen of the strength in many. And so for Sesat, the path is one of those things where it's safest and most enjoyable when you travel it with other people. And so it's recommending that you find people to join you on your journey, but to be sure to let go when it is time to part ways. And then the influence of Korat is, again, as I said, Korat is wealth and luck. So the path that you're on leads to wealth and luck, but it's both good luck and bad luck. So it's one of those things where it's a good thing for you to remember to share good fortune and let bad fortune pass quickly, is kind of how to approach your path in life. And then the trisect, which is, as I said, the year, the decade, and the century, is how kind of you impact the world and the world impacts on you. And so for Sesat, again, that's the strength in many. The great events and great people that shatter and shape the world might be the chisel, but the small choices, the insignificant individuals, and the invisible social structures are the hammer that gives it strength. And so that's something to be aware of in your life, is those invisible kind of forces that move the world, that seem to be that are not kind of the great people, the single individuals. And then the decade at Naktat is the world is a gift meant to be experienced and enjoyed. It is the birthright of every person, but we corrupt that right when we make others pay the price for the pleasure we take. And so it's one of those kind of enjoy life and live it to the fullest, but also be aware of how your choices in that impact other people. And then the century, and this is going to be true for everybody, the century is Ninat, and that is the final truth of the world. People die, regimes fall, empires crumble, but from the ashes springs new life. And so that's kind of true for all of us. So I'm going to go, now that you kind of have an understanding of the various things, the Uniat, the Sesat with Korat influence, and then these outer circles are the years, or these outer figures are the years. I'm going to move on. Where's my arrow? So Neil, and like I said, at this point, I'm going to pull out the interesting bits. So one thing I will say, Neil, you are ruled by Korat, the cornucopia of life, influenced by Quinat, the hand that holds the world. And the kind of cool thing about your chart, for one, this date shares a birthday with Tess. I don't know if this is your birthday or just a date that you put in, but this is also Tess's birthday. So yay. And then another thing, because we actually have the moon phases charted out for this setting, one of the things that's interesting is that on this date, both moons, both Charillus, the big moon, and Pomilus, the smaller moon, were full. And so what this basically means is that you have a very geometrically pleasing and balanced chart. That plus the moons indicates that you're a well-rounded person, which isn't to say that you have it all together, but at least you know where all the pieces are. And then one final thing I will say, one of the things that I think Marie mentioned is the 7 clans of the Versenian, and the Leganti don't really respect to those traditions, but it's this old folktale, kind of like a Monday's Child is loving and giving belief of the Rusenians, that the day of the week that you're born has associations with a particular clan and a clan animal. And so Nadezhrins believe that the day of the week that you're born, they kind of informs your character somewhat. So for Neil, you were born on Volachny, which is the day of the clan Dvornik, which is the clan of the fox. And so it indicates that you're a charming bon vivant, but also a crafty huckster, kind of that foxy.
Not that Alyssa likes that kind of thing or anything.
I would be clan Dvornik all the way.
And I just saw that a question has popped in of, is there a place to input our own information and generate one of the astrology charts for ourselves? We plan on putting a widget on the website like the pattern one that will at the very least give you the information. It will probably not generate the pretty image for you because that's a level of complexity that we don't think our web person can manage. But you'll at least know what it means.
I've automated, sort of semi-automated this in my art program to be able to do them, but I think it still takes me like a half hour or so, I think, is when I did your chart last night, Marie's. Sarah. So I'm swapping back and forth between my various windows. So Sarah, you are ruled by Uniat, the Axis Mundi, and I had my interesting things about your... but they seem to have gone away. Oh, no, there they are. Cool highlights. I have notes. So one of the cool things about you is you've got Tuat all over the place. And Tuat is, as I said, the Newman of self and other, the reflection, the kind of yin-yang idea. And on top of that, your moon phases on this date are Carillus waning and Carillus waning gibbous and Pomilus waning gibbous. And basically, that means that you've got a lot of Tuat, the self and other kind of reflection, personal relationships, heading towards Ninat, which is a kind of like, death and rebirth. So it's possible that you might be a little goth and nihilistic and maybe a little bit tarnished, but that you still find hope and strength and meaning in people and relationships. It's kind of a Crowley sauntering vaguely downward vibe. But basically, this is a very uncomplicated and harmonious chart with all the circles in the Tuat and everything like that. So it's got a very good flow to it. It's a very kind of pleasing chart to fall into. And then Nora is also ruled by Uniat. This is one of those things that a lot of you, just because of when you were born, ended up being ruled by Uniat or Korat and Quinat. But one of the really cool things about this one is that you are, you're influenced by Ili, which is the Newman of 0 and 10, which is the kind of worm, the snake Ouroboros eating itself, the cycle. And also that your path in the world is also got Ili in it. And so you can see in the chart that you've got this great kind of smaller Ili within a larger Ili, the decagon. And so you've kind of got reflected in your chart, not only on the small scale, but on the large scale, this kind of cyclical nature of reality that influences you a lot. And so basically, I would say that means you're kind of an old soul. You're deeply connected to the divine and the cosmos, but then also you're very in tune and aware of the cyclical nature of existence, of, this has happened before and it will happen again, kind of a thing. And then I think this is the last one. Sorry, I've been trying to go as fast as I can. So yes, Haley. So Haley, you are ruled by Korat, the cornucopia of life, influenced by Quinat, the hand that holds the world. And so the two pretty cool things that I pulled out of this are, one, this date that you gave us is the day after the start of the Mask of Mirrors. So it's one day after the very first chapter where Ren goes to Denaya and starts her con, which I just thought was interesting. And this is a very dynamic chart. There's not a lot of flow because you've actually got a lot of different figures in here, but it's got a lot of interesting things going on. And so I would say that it indicates that you're a person who struggles a lot with flow. You're kind of constantly juggling a billion things and interests and drawn in different directions, but that actually is something that, makes you happy and interesting and unique and gives you joy. So, yeah, so that is Numenatria, the quick version.
Yeah. Okay, so questions. While you were doing that, I went through and I scribbled down a few notes to try and combine a few questions that are on similar topics and such. So I'm going to start off with Anne asked this, and then there was a follow-up from someone else in sort of a similar vein of how we planned this complex of a world and this complex of a plot and so forth. Part of the answer to that is it helps to have two people. Like, with keeping track of the political complexity, yeah, having both of us to be like, wait, no, don't forget this thing over there, and wait, if we could connect it to that other thing, like the interweaving, definitely help to have two people, so that we can, basically bring extra brain power to the challenge of it.
Yeah, because there were a lot of intricate pieces, but there was always because we were constantly looking at them and talking about them, and it was the kind of thing where one of us would usually see a problem or a place where things didn't connect, or a place where they could connect better, and just have those conversations, because we were pretty much constantly, if we weren't in person having conversations, we were online in chat having conversations. We probably wrote at least another 200,000 words of just chat and brainstorming.
Maybe not quite that much, but a terrifyingly large amount. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Incidentally, collaborating does not mean that each of you does half the work you would do for a solo novel. It's more like each of you does maybe 80% of the work you would do for a solo novel. But it, helps in other ways. For the world, I mean, a chunk of that is that we are both from an anthropology background, and so we think that way anyway. We are the kind of people who are like, okay, and so then the characters sit down to have a meal. Wait, let's stop and think about, given the environment, what kinds of foods are available to them? How can we distinguish Leganti cuisine from Versenian? So, like, Leganti is much more in... it's not exactly French food, but it's got a lot more of the cream sauces and cheeses and so forth. Whereas because Vrasan is a large, river valley that's very well suited to, wet rice agriculture, and the latitudes of Vrasan are basically about the distance from Shanghai to Beijing, that Nadeja's more up at the Beijing end. Then we're like, okay, so let's look at Chinese food for a bit of inspiration there, which is why they've got the noodles, they've got rice. They have hot chocolate, which is not remotely Chinese, because I love the stuff. And so we're like, all right.
I think hot chocolate was introduced in the game because I like Mexican hot chocolate, but you don't like the spicy version of it.
I like it with cinnamon and things like that, but not with.
I was going to say with yeah. And so it's basically kind of sort of got that Mexican hot chocolate thing, but without the chili powder. So it's still got the vanilla and the cinnamon and everything like that.
So, they kind of clearly get that from maybe the far south of Vrasan or down into Isarn, which is the country that's to the south of them. They probably import that, but it's there because we like it.
For the same reason that most everybody drinks tea is because we're not big coffee drinkers. Either of us.
We actually had to make ourselves make a couple of sympathetic characters like coffee. So
because it was starting to be like, if you like coffee, you're evil, and we didn't want that.
So, I mean, it's just anything that comes up. We're always looking for ways to add texture to the scene of okay, well, if this is a conversation the characters are having when they're out on the streets, where are they? What's going on around them? Things like the skiff market, saying, okay, well, we want to have a scene that is sort of, let's do some stuff with Sibiliad and then bonding with Leato. Where can we set that? And then it was things like, how can we use that to also drop in some more details about the ways that Versenians are discriminated against with the licenses for having a permanent establishment and such. As I keep glancing over to chat, that scene was oddly arousing because of the sensual hot chocolate description. That was exactly the target we were aiming for, so yay. And so, with the world and such, we have a shared private wiki that we use to keep track of the world details because, I mean, at this point, we've invented so much stuff. There's lots of it that we go, wait, how do we decide that worked again?
I will say, I got a message from Marie yesterday that was like, oh no, the document you were working on for making the sigils for the gods' names, we changed some of those names. And so I was, but then we discovered that it didn't actually matter because I had dropped some stuff. And so the sigils, I didn't have to remake them. But so it does sometimes happen that we don't keep things as updated as we should. But in general, all the big important things, we keep that updated. We kind of have a lot of shared documents that we, that we refer to. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of like record keeping was also a key element of keeping all that stuff straight.
Yeah.
So looking at the inspirations, we've already, touched on that a little bit. Obviously a lot of people have said that Nadezhda feels Venetian because, well, we've got a bunch of canals and masks, and at that point you're going to look pretty Venetian. But there are a lot of other elements that feed into it. Like I said, Versenian food, we were looking more at Chinese because of the environment that it's going to be coming out of. There are things where, Alice mentioned the Kabbalah and the idea of the Sephirah and so forth going into some of the feel of Numenatria. The idea Versenians have where the soul has multiple parts, I completely ripped that off from ancient Egypt. It's a different structure than ancient Egypt had, but I got the idea from that. And that's really because, again, with both of us being anthropologists, our heads are full of different things from different cultures, and there's a lot of, trying to break outside the standard things that you've maybe seen in a lot of other fantasy novels of how things work and such.
Yeah.
I just thought, no, it's not that there's a full ancient Egyptian culture in the novel, just that, the influences are coming from all kinds of places, including, when it comes to the parts of the soul, ancient Egypt. So
it's like the chat is distracting.
It's a little bit difficult to keep track of both of those at once, which is not to say y'all should stop chatting, because we love watching those things go back and forth. We with the Half in Love and Lust with everyone in this book, I should make a list of everybody that Alyss has shipped in the course of us writing this. Like Juna in particular. Alyss has shipped Juna with everybody at this point, I swear. Some of the ships have names like Ren and Tess. I think you called the HMS Renifor.
Yeah, the HMS Renifor, Vargo and Iascot is Iago. Because
let me see. Sedge and Varuni is Edgeplay.
Edgeplay, yeah.
So basically, Alyss in particular ships everybody in this stupid book. So if you ship them too, then you're not the only one. I had a question, and this is where inspirations will also come in. Kitty was asking about clothing. That was something. The specifics of what people are wearing in the book, that's all Alyss. It was a little bit joint of deciding what the overall look of it should be. Yeah. I think the starting point really was, I took a couple of historical costuming and clothing books that I have, and I went through and just sort of made a list of different bits that I liked. I'm like, I like this style of collar, and I like this style of sleeve, and things like that. And then we kind of sat down and talked through how we could work those together into coherent looks. So I guess Versenian clothing is much more kind of mixed, I think, in its influences. Like the panel coats that the men wear, that's a Tibetan thing, because I saw pictures of these beautifully embroidered coats, and I thought, oh my god, that is exactly the kind of thing Versenians would have. Yeah. But I think,
for Leganti stuff, it a little bit was inherited because we had to start from how we knew the Rook looked, because we already had the Rook in our heads. And so in some ways we were, which was that kind of Alfred Noya's highwayman, French cocktails, well, he didn't have a hat, but a bunch of laces, chin, a coat of claret velvet and breeches of brown doe skin. They fitted with never a wrinkle. His boots were up to the thigh. And I can go on.
Yeah. And he rode with a jewel and twinkle.
Just about the twinkle. But we knew that was the kind of look we had for the Rook. And so when we were developing, especially the men's Leganti fashion, we kind of had this silhouette that we were already working from. And so that helped to inform what the women were wearing with the surcoat. And we have a lot more kind of blending and mixing and matching, just because, men are not restricted to the Brummel aesthetic of boring. Yeah. They get to wear cool colors and jewelry and makeup and all of that kind of stuff. I hate Paul Brummel so much. Even if he did give us bathing regularly, I don't care.
But yeah, the men, Leganti men, I think ended up a little bit more in sort of like I think 17th to 18th century, men's clothing.
Century, yeah.
We like that look. It looks good, and we wanted the men to be sexy. Man. So
yeah.
And I will also say with the Rook, like the mood of it, definitely from the Highwaymen. If you're also envisioning a bit of Assassin's Creed, you're not wrong. So, but yeah, we basically tried, apart from Leganti men, to make it not be quite as like just we took it from one specific time and place. It was a little bit more of like, okay, how can we take different features and weave them together? Yeah. Let's see. We have time for one more question, according to our Orbit Live people. So I think we probably shouldn't give any spoilers as to what's happening with Vargo in Book 2. That would be telling. So instead, I think I will just grab.
We could share the subtitle, or unofficial subtitle. I don't think that's spoilery.
Yeah. Fair enough. The subtitle is "Let's Give Vargo a Bad Day," because the subtitle of Book 1 was "Let's Give Ren a Bad Day." So, but with the question of what card was hard to name, I think this is an appropriate note to end on. Like, basically, the last card that we settled on the final name for was the Liar's Knot. The Liar's Knot. Because it is the card of trust and betrayal, and we just had the worst time coming up with a name for it, and the name that we had given it was not great. We decided to call it Constant Ivan's Oath, because you have Clever Natalia and Constant Ivan being these folkloric figures, and we're like, well, maybe like with Hare and Hound, we'll come up with a story for why it's called that. But it wasn't great. And then when we were trying to come up with a title for Book 2, I had the idea of, wait, what if we rename the card of Trust and Betrayal The Liar's Knot? And that would work for a book title. So that was the hardest one to name, honestly, and we are really pleased with what we finally landed on.
Yeah.
So that is Book 2
so thrilled with the title. I'm really...
Yeah. And that tells you a little bit about what the book's going to be like. Trust and Betrayal is your theme, as Secrets and Lies were the theme for Book 1. So, yeah, I think we are supposed to be wrapping it up now, as we've gone well over an hour at this point. I have no idea if we were supposed to stop at an hour. But yes, The Liar's Knot will be out in November. I think it is scheduled for November 18th. It may shift a little bit. In-person actual Masquerade Ball, we want to do a launch party at a convention at some point.
Before the world imploded last year, we were actually going to do a launch party at World Fantasy that was a Masquerade Ball on Halloween. But that didn't happen. So we'll do it at some other point.
Yes. Possibly for Book 3, we will have a belated launch party. But anyway,
where there will be sparkly drinks, because we've got food glitter that you can make
edible glitter.
Aja.
So you can have Aja.
Edible glitter.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for coming. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. I'm going to enjoy going back and reading the comments now that I can.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's so true. And I hope you all have a good day.
Yep. Good evening.
Yes, evening, day, whatever time of
it's day for us.
Maybe something. All right. I do not think we have